September has come and gone, and there were so many amazing releases over the last month. Sometimes it's just so hard to look back and see how many games are releasing each month nowadays. Feels like it is skyrocketed with how many amazing games are coming out. However, with the end of the last month, we can now look back and see exactly what games were most popular and most played on the Steam Deck over that past month. So in this video, we're going to talk about the top 20 games that were most played on the Steam Deck in September of 2025. If you want to see more videos like this, hit that like and subscribe button, and hit the notification bell to be notified as soon as our next video goes live. Starting with the top 2 most played games, we've got Hollow Knight Silksong dominating the charts, which very clearly makes sense, as well as its predecessor, Hollow Knight, falling not too far behind. It makes complete sense that both of these games are in that number 1 and number 2 slot, especially with how popular Silksong was as soon as it released. Even today, I'm still seeing memes and discussions about it on social media, so it's clear that it's not going to be leaving anytime soon. Still, I'm going to be very curious to see if it can retain that number 1 spot for the time being, as we have seen some other big games do like Vampire Survivors, Balatro, and Stardew Valley. Heading to the number 3 slot, we got Hades 2, which actually just saw its 1.0 release, which is probably a big reason why it shot up in the charts from its previous position, which was at least 10 to 15 points down. Hades 2 is a fantastic game in its own right, and Hades helped define the roguelike genre, so seeing Hades 2 climb all the way back up for its 1.0 release is just wonderful. It absolutely deserves to be up there as well, and is a fantastic verified game that really does perform exceptionally on the Steam Deck. In the number 4 slot, we got No Man's Sky, which I always found a little bit weird. The game does work and it does perform, but I did find a good chunk of spots where it can kind of drop. Even still, No Man's Sky is on the list, and it does deserve to be there since for the most part it runs really well, still getting an insane amount of updates, and honestly is probably one of the best space exploration games that exist right now. Coming in at number 5, we've got Stardew Valley, which is actually lower than I expected. Usually I would see Stardew Valley, Balatro, Brotato towards the top of the list, but seeing it go down to the number 5 slot is still pretty insane. The farming life simulator has been out for an exceptionally long time, so even though it has been out and it has been around, it's still up there in the top 5. That's pretty amazing in itself. This is also another very clearly verified game, runs like a charm, there's no complaints whatsoever. Coming in at number 6 was the brand new release of Megabonk. You smash your way through endless waves of enemies, grow powerful, grab loot, level up, the usual that we would see in Survivor-esque roguelikes. But from what I can tell, it seems like a nice balance between Risk of Rain 2 and Vampire Survivors, and honestly, I am all for it. This is something I really need to try out and I really need to play as soon as I possibly can. Coming up at number 7, we've got Baldur's Gate 3, and it actually went down a point, but I'm surprised it didn't go up higher. The RPG recently released a native build for the Steam Deck, which improves performance especially in areas like Act 3. So I expect it to actually deserve its place, since before this it had its issues, and I was more on the fence of not recommending it because it had those performance problems. However, most of those have subsided, and now I think it deserves the spot on the list. At number 8, Deep Rock Galactic Survivor is here. It basically took that Deep Rock Galactic first-person shooter formula and turned it into a Vampire Survivors-esque game, and it runs really well on the Steam Deck and absolutely a joy to play. It's actually kind of interesting seeing the game appear back here because on last month's list it disappeared entirely, so it's great to see it come back. At number 9, we've got the poker roguelike itself, Balatro. Again, this is one of those games that usually stuck to the top 3 slots, so seeing it go all the way down to number 9 is pretty insane. Even still, it's a wonderful game to play, one of my favorites, and I really think it should have won Game of the Year. It is wonderful to play on the Steam Deck, very low battery drain, 90 frames per second. There should be no issues playing this on the go. At number 10, we have the original Hades. Similar to Hollow Knight and Hollow Knight Silksong, Hades and Hades 2 have populated the top 20 list for a while, but even still, it's great to see it. Hades performs just as well as Hades 2, if not a little bit better, and is just a blast. Coming in at number 11 is Cyberpunk 2077. This is another game that usually stuck to like the top 5, top 7 games that are on the list, so it did drop a little bit, and again, this is probably all from the Silksong, but regardless, it's still on the list, and it still deserves a spot here. It can have a little bit of performance issues here and there when it comes to Dogtown and, in some pretty big firefights, but even still, it runs way better than I would expect on the Steam Deck for a game of this caliber. So while it's not perfect, it absolutely deserves that verified badge and very enjoyable. On the number 12 spot, we have Peak. Peak is a newly released-ish first-person game where you're climbing a mountain with friends. It's very small, but it is so much fun, so chaotic. It's just a blast to play. It does need a little bit of compromise on the Steam Deck in regards to its frame rate, but regardless, it is a ton of fun. I played this for a bit with our other freelancer, Oliver, for his review, and we were just having a blast as we tried to get up the mountain and constantly kept running out of stamina and then ragdolling down the mountain. It was good times. At number 13, we have The Binding of Isaac Rebirth. Again, one of the original roguelikes that really popularized the genre. The Binding of Isaac Rebirth is actually a refresh of Binding of Isaac, since the original is just called The Binding of Isaac, but even still, both games are awesome, and I can't help but recommend it, especially if you're a fan of roguelikes. Coming at number 14, we have Brotato, which is very similar to games like Vampire Survivors, but there's just something really unique about it. You play as essentially a potato, and there's multiple different potatoes you can play as, and you're constantly fighting these enemies coming out, getting upgrades, etc, etc. It performs exceptionally well on the Steam Deck. It is addicting to play. I personally choose not to play it because it will be very hard to get me to stop once I start. At number 15, we've got Slay the Spire, which popularized the deck-building roguelike genre. You essentially start off with a deck of cards and you fight enemies using those cards, which can allow you to attack enemies, to bolster up your defenses, to use special moves, etc, etc. It's a fantastic game, and nowadays I see so many other games that are very similar to it, but nothing really has hit the mark like Slay the Spire has. At number 16, Red Dead Redemption 2 takes the spot. This is actually one of the few games that I had a little bit of trouble understanding why it's on the list. It's a little bit difficult to run, and there are a lot of spots that do drop frame rate, but even still, it's pretty solid. I would consider the hardest part of this game to have to go through the Rockstar launcher, which is never fun, but it is playable, it is enjoyable, and it's still pretty crazy that we can play a game like this in the palm of our hands. At number 17, we've got Helldivers 2, probably the game that I'm most curious about being on this list. That's not to say it's a bad game at all. I think it's a ton of fun and I have a blast when playing it with my friends, but it is not great on the Steam Deck. Once the waves of enemies start coming in, frame rate can drop dramatically, and as soon as bombs start dropping, explosions everywhere, it can get a little bit too chaotic to actually enjoy. Even still, it's here on the list at the number 17 slot. I don't know if I personally agree with it, but hey, it's here. At number 18, we've got Hogwarts Legacy. My experience with this open world wizardry RPG has never been a good one. I've constantly had drops and performance issues, never stuck to 30 frames per second, and is just not an enjoyable experience. I have seen other people play it, and I've seen other people enjoy it, so I do think it's possible. Is it something I would choose to play? Probably not, but that's mostly because my experience with it, for whatever reason, has never been good. At number 19, we've got Elden Ring. If you're looking for a Souls-like to get on the Steam Deck and enjoy and play and lose yourself in, Elden Ring is still one of the top contenders. It's a fantastic game. The exploration and open world is beautiful. Combat is brutal. And it just feels like the perfect amalgamation of what makes a Souls-like a Souls-like. Of course, it's developed by From Software, which is the father of Souls-like, so it makes sense. But even still, it's a great game, and I do recommend it. And finally, at the number 20 slot, we've got Vampire Survivors, which revolutionized the survivor genre. A lot of games on this list, like Brotato, like Megabonk, like Deep Rock Galactic Survivor, were all influenced by Vampire Survivors. This game that released at an extremely cheap price, but was so addicting and hard to put down. Nowadays, they've got crossovers with Castlevania and Contra, and it's become so much bigger than it started out. They're also playing around with testing co-op multiplayer, which I'm very excited to see how it's going to work, and I'm looking forward to trying out for myself. And those are the top 20 games that were played on the Steam Deck in September of 2025. There were 3 new games added and 3 games left from the previous month. This month, we have Hollow Knight Silksong, Megabonk, and Deep Rock Galactic Survivor that made their way onto the top 20 list this month. However, that left The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, Fallout 4, and the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim Special Edition off the list. It's kind of crazy looking at those 2 sets of games because the 3 games that left were all these large-scale open-world RPGs, and the new games added were smaller scale indie games like Hollow Knight Silksong, Megabonk, and Deep Rock Galactic Survivor. Still, this is a worthy list of games, and I do recommend checking each of them out. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like and subscribe button, and hit the notification bell to be notified as soon as our next video goes live. And a huge thank you to our patrons. You guys are awesome. See you next time.